Hey guys, this is Uncle Tech Sport, and today we're taking a look at what kind of system you need to play Doom Eternal. Before getting into it, I have to say this is a fantastic game and it's amazingly well optimized as well using the Vulkan API. The GPU test system consists of an AMD Ryzen R5 3600 with 16GB of 3733CL15 memory on a X470 Taichi motherboard. For Nvidia, I use the latest 442.79 drivers, and for AMD, I use the 20.3.1 drivers. Eventually, I had some problems installing it. I tested a 2070 Super, a 5700 XT, and a 1070 in all the popular resolutions. Then I tested an R9 290 and a laptop with the GTX 1050 4GB at 1080p high settings. This game will not let you apply settings that will require more VRAM than you have available, which means in theory a 1070 should actually be able to run on higher graphics settings than an RTX 2060, due to the fact that it has 2GB more VRAM. Of course, the RTX 2060 has more processing power, but still. If you want max settings, 6GB of VRAM is not cutting it, even at 1080p. That's something to keep in mind, and 3GB 1060 users, you have my sympathies. I tested the game at Ultra Nightmare settings with dynamic resolution and motion blur turned off. But enough talk, let's take a look at the numbers. We start off with the GPU tests, and we start at the most widely used resolution, 1920 by 1080. At this resolution, the 1070 delivered 142.6 frames per second on average, a good result, but the 5700 XT is 57% ahead at 223.9 frames per second on average. The 2070 Super though beats that by 9% and comes in at 245 frames per second on average. Turning the resolution up to 1440p, the 1070 is now down to 96.5 frames per second on average, with frame times hovering just above 60 frames per second. The 5700 XT is 64% ahead here at 158.1 frames per second on average, but is once again defeated by the 2070 Super being 7% faster. At 4K, the 1070 is now down to below 60 frames per second on average at 47.6 frames per second on average. The 5700 XT has a smaller but significant 47% lead at 4K, coming in at 70.4 frames per second. While the 2070 Super is again the winner, beating out the 5700 XT by a larger 12% at 4K. Now onto ultra-wide. At 2560 by 1080, the 1070 is delivering 116.6 frames per second on average. The 5700 XT comes in at 183.7 frames per second, beating out the 1070 by 57.5%. The 2070 Super is yet again in first place with a 9% lead over the 5700 XT and coming in just below 200 frames per second on average. At 3440 by 1440, the 1070 is doing 78.9 frames per second on average, being beaten out by the 5700 XT at 123.7 frames per second on average, which makes out a 65% lead. The 2070 Super though is still king at 134.4 frames per second on average, beating out the 5700 XT by 9%. Now let's test the R9 290 and GTX 1050 at 1080p high settings. So here the GTX 1050 did 43.2 frames per second on average, which isn't great. The R9 290 does much better at 80.7 frames per second on average, and delivers a very playable experience at high settings. But the question remains, can we get the 4GB GTX 1050 above 60 frames per second on average at 1080p? Let's find out. Starting by bumping the preset down to medium, we get an additional 25% performance and end up at 53.8 frames per second on average. Still some ways from our 60 frames per second target. Going to low gets us another 5% of performance, but at 56.5 frames per second on average, we are still short of the target 60 frames per second. Enabling dynamic resolution with a medium preset does get us there at 63.4 frames per second on average, but the image resolution takes a noticeable dip as the dynamic resolution often goes as low as 50% of 1080p. Moving to low settings with dynamic resolution makes for a much more playable experience, but image resolution still takes a hit, but not as much as with the medium preset, as you can see here. Now let's look at the CPU test. So all the CPUs were tested with 16GB of 3200MHz TL16 memory. We start at 1080p high settings with the 5700 XT, and here all CPUs deliver close to 260 frames per second on average, with the i5 6600K edging out the 3600 by 2 frames per second. The frame time store points to the Ryzen CPUs delivering a smoother experience, although you would probably be hard pressed to notice the difference between a 0.1% low of 149 frames per second and 188 frames per second. Moving to 720p low settings changes the landscape drastically, so the i5 6600K is now down to last place at 297.7 frames per second on average, with the R5 1600 being 2% ahead. The 2700X was 4% faster than the 1600 at 3.9 GHz, and to be honest, I was expecting a larger difference here, but the star of the show is the R5 3600 at 377.3 frames per second on average, which is a 20% lead over the 2700X. Equipping the 3600 with 3733 MHz CL50 memory leads to another 3% performance increase. But it has to be said, when you play at high resolutions with higher graphical settings, all the CPU will perform very similarly, although the i5 6600K was pegged at 100% when I tested it. And it also needs to be said that a newer 6-core i5 or 8-core i7, i9 would probably be a lot better and perform very similarly, if not outperform the R5 3600. And that's everything I have for now. I hope this was somewhat helpful or interesting to you. Thank you so much for watching, and farewell for now.